I don't know. Yeah, I always give them the heads up when I want to start. I've sort of wisened up to that, and if I'm talking about nonsense, I'll make sure my microphone is off. So, unless there happens to be a lip reader out there, they won't hear me. Anyhow, we're talking about design guidelines and what makes for a good website, and what, or we could look the flip side, what makes for a bad website. We want to then move from that discussion into the discussion of how do we get there. Okay, now that we have an idea in our head of what makes a good website, how do we get there? I want to, and we could talk about this forever. I mean, I find this a very interesting topic, and it's almost more fun looking at bad websites than it's looking at good websites, because, some of these things, I can't believe organizations put these out as websites, It's one thing, if a kid has a, Justin Bieber fan site and it looks horrible, okay, all right, they're having fun, Yeah, I know who's Justin Bieber. He's a famous web designer. But like, if it's a kid doing that, it's like, okay, you're having a ball. Who cares? Or like it used to be like with MySpace pages. Facebook is very uniform, but like MySpace pages you could customize all over. And some of those were hideous looking. But you know what? Who cares? The kid's having fun, whatever. But when you see organizations do that, and they look so bad, it's kind of like, oh, well, you should know better than to do that. So at any rate, what I'd like to do is I'd like to sort of summarize my thoughts on good web design and then move the discussion into how we're going to get there. Knowing full well that we haven't talked about every aspect of good web design, and we'll keep coming back to it, and we'll keep discussing it, and we'll keep we'll keep hitting on this topic throughout the semester, and we'll even talk about it more as we go through the discussion of the design process, of some of the things that maybe we didn't talk about in much detail. To summarize, number one, good web design is all about helping people achieve their goals. That's number one, and that probably should be number 2 through 10 as well. All right? That is the, that is the acid test of a good website. And keeping in mind that both an organization has goals and individuals have goals. For example, a band may have a website, and you could help, the band could help their listeners achieve their goals by giving them all their music for free to download. All right? Yeah, that would achieve their goals. The user's goals, that is. But it wouldn't do too good for achieving the band's goals. All right? The hope is that you can find some sort of compromise in between where you are both satisfying your goals and satisfying the goals of the organization. But that's number one. Not about colors, not about fonts, not about anything like that. It's about goals. All right? Second thing I'd like to say about design is it is entirely situational. Situational. That is, it's very tough to come up with a set of guidelines that are cut and dried and, always do this. We could maybe come up with a few, but there'll be cases where you'll say, you know what? In this instance, we wouldn't do that because, and again, that all relates to the goals. The goals sort of trump everything else. Take as solid of a guideline as having good navigation for your website. All right? Gee, that's one I would think every website would want to have. Well, there's probably cases where you might not want to have good navigation. Let's think of, when would you think of a case, let's think hypothetically, and again, this is a stretch, I know, but I'm doing it to make a point that for almost, every rule there's the exception to. So even something as solid as having good navigation on your website, when might you not want to have good navigation on your website? When you don't, okay, when you don't want someone to find something. Okay, well, what would be an example? What's an example of something where you don't want to make it easy for people to find something?
You could offer some sort of rebate, market the rebate, but the reality is you don't want them to actually utilize it.
Okay, that's kind of deceptive, where you offer a deal but you make it impossible to find. You know, it's kind of like write your complaint here and you give a little tiny postage stamp thing. All right. Can anyone think of a case? Okay. Someplace you want to have, what word did you use? Captive?
Captive audience.
Okay.
You don't want them to cover information in per se. Something of that nature.
Okay. That's a good thought. Let's think of more concrete examples. What do they do in the supermarket?
Direct you down certain aisles.
They direct you down certain aisles. They also make it difficult to find some things, right? Why? So that you spend some time exploring the store. So, granted, that may be a flimsy example, but let's think of an example like this. Let's say I was doing a site. Let me collect my thoughts here. I kind of got diverted with the supermarket example. The question I had, which reminds me of my grocery shopping tomorrow, you know. I asked the question before, when is it that, you know, in what situations is there something out there, but you don't want to make it easy for someone to find? And the obvious thing that comes to mind is a game or a puzzle. All right? You may want, what if your website is for, say, something creative, like a movie? All right? Where people aren't there to necessarily get just the facts and get the information. But people want to immerse themselves in the experience, almost like a game, where you're going in and things are sort of unveiling and so on. Here's a classic example of this. Does anyone know, has anyone heard of the website I Love Bees? All right. It's a famous marketing example. Let's go and let's look at this site. Let me bring it up. I hope it's still in existence. I imagine it is. All right. We'll go this. I Love Bees. Welcome to I Love Bees. This is my webpage mostly dedicated to beekeeping. I've been beekeeping for 7 years and I'm still learning. I have 3 hives. Okay, don't look at anything else on the screen. When you go into it, that's what you see. Then all of a sudden, whoa, something weird is going on here. And you go and there are different, this is an audio file. Not sure if the audio works on here. And so on and so forth. Clearly, this is not a site that is about beekeeping. Clearly, this is something else. What is the I Love Bees website? I don't know if anyone was able to read this. This is if we look here, I Love Bees was an alternate reality game that served as a real-world experience and a viral marketing campaign for the release of the video game Halo 2. So in other words, this is deliberately made obscure. You know, a site was created and I don't recall exactly, but like they kind of like let the word out, hey, you should go, and it kind of went viral, and people told their friends and so on, and it served as a marketing campaign. And this is used as a very good example of the viral marketing. Now again, this page was likely more effective than a site that says, here, please buy our new game Halo 2, because it sort of immersed the people in it, got people interested. People that enjoy this sort of thing become very obsessive about it, and they want to know the backstory, and they want to know this and that. Anyone that's ever been on a Lost bulletin board, is like people... Right. Exactly. People scrutinize, he was wearing a Rolex watch in that, and it's like, to the degree that it seems crazy. Now, let's not lose a bigger point here. Would I go and I make a site for Lorain County Community College that was like this? I love butterflies. No. All right? You have to, but that gets back to the original point that it's situational, right? Almost every guideline you can think of an exception to say, well, yes, we want clear navigation. Yes, we want to be very clear about the purpose of the site. But if our goal is to create, say, an immersive experience, or let's say, for example, we say, maybe a more realistic example, we're a retailer and we say, we have a, certain pages will be tagged with a internet special, sticker. And anything that you buy with the internet special sticker will have, so much of a discount. But we're not telling you which of the pages is the internet special. That's the equivalent of making it hard to find something in a supermarket, right? Because you're going to go in and you're going to look for items that have that internet special, and in the meantime, the hope is that you'll see something else and want to buy that. All right? Bringing back to this point is situational. All right? Almost any guideline that we can say, we could probably think of a case where, we're going to bend that guideline a little bit. It's almost like they say in any number of disciplines, know the rules so you know when to break them. All right? So know what constitutes good design guidelines, but realize that it's situational. And the goals can sometimes trump these design principles. The goals of having your users get a very immersive experience and to create a viral marketing thing, in this case, trumped the very reasonable, very common goals of having clear navigation and having a clearly defined purpose and so on. All right? Okay. Third thing I would say is a lot of these guidelines get into an issue of balance. Balance is a good thing. You should eat well, but it's okay to treat yourself once in a while. You should exercise, but not be obsessed with it. All these kind of things. You can talk about even in a personal life, having sort of a balance. Now, here's the thing I'm going to say, though. All right? Typically, people tend to be prone to be off balance in one direction or more than the other. For example, are there people in this world that exercise too much? Yes, there are. All right? However, is that true of the typical person? Probably not. Probably the good common sense advice of get more exercise is probably good for the overwhelming majority of the people in the world. All right, or at least in this country. Now, therefore, a lot of these things, when we talk about balance, I'm going to try to talk in opposite of what people's tendency is. Because people's tendency is to overkill on websites. All right? Therefore, a lot of what I'm going to say is about simplifying, making things clear. Don't have too much clutter. You can go the opposite way. There could be websites that don't have enough stuff on a page. They have too much white space. But you know what? That's not the mistake people usually make. All right? So, yeah, you do have to balance it, but the general tendency is to put too much. Why? Well, because of two things. First of all, some of the things that you put on websites are fun to do, all right, for the developer. All right? A lot of the bad websites that people had all these things animated and background music and all that. I know, when you write things like that, it's a blast. Oh, look what I did. You call your friends over and you look, and it's fun to do. But it's not particularly fun from a user's perspective because it does do nothing to serve their goals. They didn't come to hear some cheesy MIDI music play in the background or see some stupid little animation. They came to get some answers to some questions. All right? The other thing is people suffer from the mentality of if a little bit is good, then more will be better. All right? And that's not typically the case. You know, it's not the case with ibuprofen, right? You know, you take 2 of them, that's good. You take 8 of them, that's probably not a good idea, right? So that mentality isn't always valid. All right? From the viewpoint of introducing too much complexity, clutters things, has a potential to distract things. Still, we do need to keep in mind that there's always a balance being struck. And oftentimes that balance is between different flavors of this question. And we'll phrase this question a couple different ways, a couple different slants. Simple versus complex. Clear versus expressive. Sparse, cluttered. Too little, too much. All right? For each one of these things, for almost every factor, there's going to be a sweet spot that you're aiming for. And again, that's going to depend on the goals, and that's going to depend on your situation. But simple versus complex. Again, you know, a website that just has, each page has just, you know, a little bit of text, a few sentences, that may be very simple, all right, but it could be overkill, too simple. Complex could be, you know, if you have paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of long, convoluted stuff. It might be better to break it down into several pages then and have a simple paragraph with links to more detail if people are interested in more detail. So that might be the way that you would balance that simple and complexity issue. In other words, instead of having, you know, just a short paragraph that doesn't give enough information, that's too simple, as opposed to having a gigantic dissertation, all right, you have the short paragraph with links if people are interested in more information. That way, a casual viewer that's only interested in the highlights gets that, but someone who wants to go more in depth can get that as well. Clear versus expressive. This comes out a lot of different ways. All right? You know, I'm reminded, you know, of my dear sister when I talk to her on the phone. You know, if I ask her what happened today, you know, she'll tell me about, say, taking their dog to the vet. All right? And it's funny because if someone were to ask me, you know, what happened today, it's like, you know, took the cat to the vet, they got their shots. That would be it. All right? My sister, on the other hand, will say, well, I took the dog to the vet. I got up at about 7:30 and I told my husband, you know, get the dog ready. And he was like, all right, I'll get it in a minute. And she'll go on doing voices for the different people, all right, doing voices for the receptionist at the vet, talking about the dog's reaction, talking about the emotions and the thoughts that the dog must be having through their head, all right. And then finally he's like, yeah, and the dog got their shots. Now, the interesting thing is, all right, is I would take a clear approach. Yep, cat got their shots. She would take an expressive thing. Who's a better storyteller, though? She is, right? So, if you are, Jack Webb on Dragnet and you want just the facts, all right, then a simple approach is required. However, depending on the particular situation and the goals, the more expressive can be favorable. That's a much more entertaining story to hear all that. It takes 10 times as long, but it's more entertaining and it's more expressive. This comes out in a variety of different ways. For example, I talked about the movie Helvetica, I think, in this class. All right? Helvetica is about as clear and simple font as you can have. Right? I mean, if you look at it, it's very clear, very simple. Yet, a lot of places use other fonts that might not be quite as readable. Why? Because they create a mood. They're more expressive. All right? Let's... Here's an example of what's sometimes called a grunge font. Maybe. All right. These may not be instantly as clear and readable as Helvetica or the simpler fonts, but somehow they're a little more expressive. Oh, here's a good one where the eye's a little lightning bolt. Pardon me? And A's apparently don't exist. I think that got cut off. I hope so anyhow.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so on. So, what does it come back to? It comes back to goals, situation, to decide what you're going to do. If you are, for example, a standard business, all right, then a very simplistic, readable font will help you convey your message clearly. If, however, you're marketing a new energy drink or you're marketing a new kind of jeans or whatever, then maybe a font like that, a clear, simple font like Helvetica, will seem boring to your audience and won't make the impact. There's more than just the clarity. There's the expression that's needed. All right. Any questions about this? Anything to add to this? I could probably talk about this all day. In fact, maybe I already have talked about this all day. I don't know. I had to look up at the clock to see what time it is. All right. But do remember there's balancing, and you need to strike a balance between making it simple and being more expressive or adding more complexity or whatever. All right. Now, the question becomes then, how do we get there? All right. We've described what constitutes a good website. And again, notice that I didn't really talk too much about the specific colors that you pick. Use green because green says that, I didn't really talk about that much. That comes into play, but they're not necessarily the primary issues in good web design. All right? What do you suppose the first step that we're going to take in designing our website, based on everything I said? What word do you think is going to be in the sentence that describes the first thing that we do? Goal. Right. First thing we want to do when we design a website is we want to identify the goals. All right? Identify the goals, and these goals exist both for the organization and for the users. Now here's the thing about goals. The more specific and the more measurable the goals are, the better the goals are. All right? If we're a band, let's say, and we want to create a website, and we say that our goal in creating this website is to have more people like us. How do you measure that? How do you know more people is liking you? If instead you say, our goal in creating this website is to increase our sales from so many downloads to so many downloads, or to get 5,000 likes on Facebook, all right, as opposed to the vague people liking us, all right, or greater attendance at our live shows, or more live shows, get more jobs for our band, and so on. All those things are measurable, and the more measurable you can make the goal, the better off you are, because then you can look at it and say, yeah, we've achieved the goal. No, we haven't. So again, measurable is good. Measurable and specific is good with goals when you can. Now, these goals should be what it is you want out of the website, both from the user's perspective and from the organization's perspective. It's not going to be something like, my goal in developing a website, and some students do this sometimes, is they'll put down, the goal for the organization is to have a website with clear navigation. That's not a goal, right? First of all, that's just a pretty common basic design principle, right? Unless you're doing the I Love Bees website, all right? So that's not really a goal. That's not what you hope to achieve. When you're done with this project, you don't simply want to say, show all your friends, hey, look, I have a website and it has good navigation, right? Well, so what? What did that help you accomplish for your organization? All right? You also don't want to talk about a goal as being something like, the goal for my website is to give information about my products, right? Why not? What's wrong with that as a goal? Well, number one, you can't measure it. Number two, your goal isn't simply to get information out about your products. Your goal then is to take that and, have that translate into more sales, for example. All right? Or if you're your band, your goal is to have people know more about the biography of the band members. Well, why? What does that help you achieve if they know that? You need to separate goals or strategy from tactics. All right? Goals are what it is you want to achieve. Tactics are the steps that you're going to take to achieve those goals. Almost any goal can be achieved through a variety of tactics. All right? Let's say I have a jewelry store. All right? And I'm thinking of creating a website for my jewelry store. All right? My goal is obviously going to be something like, I want to sell more jewelry. Right? I could achieve that goal several different ways. Right? One way I could achieve that goal is to sell jewelry online. All right? I could, create a website with a shopping cart, and here you go, and if you want to buy this watch, you put it in your cart and you check out and all that. That'd be one way to accomplish that. Another tactic, though, you could say is, you know what? I don't think people are going to buy jewelry online, right? Because so much of jewelry is about actually seeing it, looking at it, seeing how it looks and all that. You're not going to really trust, especially if you're spending a lot of money, just a picture that you're going to see online. So the tactic might be to, instead of selling online, to use the website as a way of funneling people to your physical stores, your brick and mortar stores, as they say, or physical stores. At the initial point of the discussion, we're talking about the strategies. We're talking about the goals that we want to achieve. We're going to leave those tactics until later. All right, the tactics come in sort of in the next step. So our strategies relate to what it is we want to achieve from our website. They're the end results. We're obviously creating this website for a reason. All right? If you think of, say, and again, you know, the easiest examples to give are sort of a company wants to sell more. But it goes beyond that, right? I mean, a nonprofit organization. What do they want to do? Well, they might want to one of their goals might be to have more people contact them for assistance. You know, if the nonprofit gives assistance to homeless people, let's say, or gives assistance to people having trouble with finances or whatever. All right. One of their goals might be to have more contacts. You know, to enlarge the people that are approaching them for assistance. All right. Or to provide online resources for those people to educate people about particular issues or so on. All right? So, a college, right, you know, we have goals. We have goals to for one thing, make it easier for people to register, you know, is a goal. To give information about people, about what courses they need to graduate. So you don't have lines that go 2 miles back of everyone wanting to get into the counselors every year, which you end up probably doing anyhow, but still. All right, the goal is to reduce that. Maybe have a 2-mile long line instead of a 4-mile long line or something. All right, so you're putting up the website for a reason. So what is it you hope to gain from this? That's what the goals are. The tactics are going to come later, like how we're going to achieve those goals. Now, the one thing I will say is this is clearly not something where it's cut and dry between goals and tactics. You know, there's gray areas where you may see something as a goal and I might see it as a tactic or vice versa. But the idea is you ought to be focused in what it is that you want to achieve, as specific as possible and as measurable as possible. Now, let's talk about user goals for a second. This gets a little more involved and a little more complicated. Someone define for me the typical user for Lorain County Community College's website. Okay, that's true. The one thing you said, the student said they want to find something specific. That's true. But let's talk about a profile. Who is the typical? If you were to describe the typical user of LC's website, who would they be? Okay, one statement you said is a potential student. Really? So none of you folks are potential users? One second. None of you folks are potential users then? Because you're not potential students, you are students. Go ahead.
We need to go on to Angel.
Okay. 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 So the statement was is you need one specific part of the site all the time, current students, as opposed to prospective students. All right. Yeah. I'm being difficult today, and I'm asking questions that don't have answers, right? Because there is no typical visitor to LC's website. There is, you know, there are what? 300,000, exactly. There's 300,000 people in Lorain County or so, give or take, I think, that could be interested in visiting LC's website, and every one of them is apt to have different goals. Wow, that makes for a challenging job, right? To write a website that's going to accommodate 300,000 people's goals. Well, it's not quite that bad. Why not?
Well, because there aren't 300,000 goals, you probably begin to break that down and maybe have 10 main goals.
Okay. And I actually heard you say it a second ago. There's categories of users. All right? And this is an important thing to realize because too often in IT, we talk about the user as though there is one person out there or one kind of person that's going to be using the software or using the website or whatever. So we want to expand that. All right? Practically, we can't expand it to treat every individual as an individual. But we can do better than lumping everyone into one category. And we can come up with different kinds of people that are users of Elsie's website. All right. Who would be some people that would be, what are some categories of people that would be users to Elsie's website? We said one already, right? Prospective students. Okay. Someone that is looking for a job. Current students.
Cultural folks, soccer center.
Community members looking for cultural events. Or, yeah, cultural events, I guess is probably a good way to put it. Faculty and staff. Area businesses looking possibly to provide training to their employees. All right. Even under prospective students, actually these might both be prospective students. These might be, one group might be what we call traditional students, that is students that are, just graduating from high school and are looking for their next step in their education. Or there might be what they call typically non-traditional students, which are students that maybe want to switch careers, maybe want to switch jobs or whatever, and are interested in picking up new skills. Okay. So now, when we start looking at this, we can get a much better idea what the goals are, because we're not going to try to identify goals for this nameless, faceless entity called the user. Instead, we're going to look at these different categories of users. And one little trick that at first I thought was really hokey and really dumb, but I think there's merit to it, is there's a suggestion made that you create fake personas. You make up people that are representative of these groups. And you give them a little profile. For example, maybe one of your personas is Mary. You might even get a picture of her. All right? And you might say Mary is a high school senior. Who's going to be graduating. And is trying to decide where to go to college. And doesn't really have a strong idea of what they want to study. Maybe has some preferences, but doesn't really have a good solid notion of what it is they want to study. All right? You might then have another persona. Mike. Who's a faculty member? Who's been here for 11 years? and needs to know how to get a hold of his colleagues for different projects. All right? And you could go down the line, all right, and define these personas. Now the idea is you're still not necessarily going to hit everyone, but at least you're making some effort to try to be comprehensive in your coverage. And you're going to cover greater ground than if you try to view all your users as being the same. All right? Now for each of these groups, they have some goals. All right? A prospective student, wants to know what programs are available, wants to know how do you apply to go to school there, what's the process of becoming a student, what is it I need to do. Prospective students will have all sorts of questions like, maybe some assistance about what classes I should take. Gee, I'm not really sure about what it is I want to study. Maybe you can give me some ideas. Or maybe you could give me, what are some good classes to take while I'm going through the process of deciding? Or maybe I need to just talk to a counselor here and sort of ask these questions in person. All right? A prospective student, a prospective traditional student, is apt to have those sorts of questions. All right? If we were to look at, say, a non-traditional student, they may know a little bit more about what it is that they want, or they may know specifically this, or they may have an idea about colleges. Maybe they've gone to college in the past or whatever. They may have some different sorts of questions that they want to ask. A faculty person obviously has different questions still. The point is we can do a better job if we break down this broad area of goals into goals for each group of personas, or goals for each persona. It seems corny to give them names, but the idea is you really then, by making up a little story about the person, a little backstory, and really personifying them, the idea is you can better put yourself in that person's shoes, as opposed to saying, I am a traditional student, What would a traditional student want? You say, what does Mary want? Mary isn't sure about what courses she should take. And it really helps you to empathize and to think about that. All right? So at first I thought it was kind of dumb, but now I kind of like the approach of doing that, because it really personifies that and really allows you to do that. So what does this have to do with your project? All right? In your project, you're going to create a design document that is going to have 5 parts. All right? And what we've been talking about for the past 15 or 20 minutes is the first part, which is the strategy section. All right? The strategy section is where you define what your goals are in creating the site, and what the different user goals are. You also document the different personas. I don't think I require you to do it for the assignment, for the project, the semester project assignment, which is, due, in 2 steps. But ideally, you'll have goals for all the different personas, because again, they have different goals. Let's go and look at the documents online on Angel about the project. I have the assignment online, and I also have a sample that I created. And I'm not sure if that was a good idea or not. I think it's a good idea because I think putting that example helped clarify a lot of questions that many of my students had. The downside of it is people essentially clone which, I guess is okay to a degree, but, this is just meant to be a overview. Let's look at the project design instructions and rubric rather. All right. Here I describe the 5 sections, and we've been talking about the strategy section. All right. One thing I notice here that I forgot to remove this. See page 51 in Elements of the User Experience. Elements of User Experience is really a good book, and we do have copies of it in the library. In addition, I have a copy of it you can borrow. But if you don't have that book, that's okay. That used to be a textbook in this class, but it's no longer a textbook in the class. So if you see that, you can ignore that if you want. I'm talking about personas, and they just go into, they just explain in a little more detail what I've already explained about personas. The 5 sections are strategy, scope, structure, wireframe, sometimes called skeleton, and then prototype, which is sometimes called surface. If you want to have something easy to remember, all 5 of them start with S's. All right. But at any rate, we're talking about the strategy section. The thing that you will notice is in each step, we get more and more specific and tangible. Someone hit their button. There we go. All right. We get more specific and more tangible at each step. Initially, we're just talking about goals. We're not talking about colors. All right. We're not talking about fonts. We're not talking about any of that stuff. That comes later. And that's important. All right. For all the reasons that we said. But we're not talking about that now. The first step is really making sure that we've defined the goals. Making sure we know who our audience is, who our typical users are, and what their goals are, and what they like, and what they may be looking for. This is important to do right off the bat because, as we talked about before, good web design, situational, depends on the problem, and depends on the goals of all the parties involved. So we want to make sure we really have a good grasp of those before we go any further. All right? And that's what we do in the strategy phase. So far we have talked about this section. If you have not already read this document, please read it. In addition, read my example. Because what I did is I created a hypothetical example for a project, a sample plan. My design for a website about the legends of jazz music. And here's my strategy section, along with my personas. All right, so that's the strategy section right there. So read through these 2 documents on your own, the requirements for the project and my sample. And we'll be continuing to discuss these on Tuesday of next week, and we'll continue through to discuss the design. Any questions? All right.